Hello again. Welcome to AI Decoded. 3 countries are about to host the biggest sporting event on Earth, the 2026 World Cup. 48 teams, 104 matches, 6 billion fans around the world. And for the first time, artificial intelligence at the very heart of the tournament. New technology to make offside decisions, real-time virtual replicas of all 16 stadiums so that organisers can monitor crowds and manage safety across the 3 countries from one single command centre, and a completely new experience for fans watching in the ground and those observing at home. Lenovo, FIFA's technology partner, is calling it a football revolution. But it must be said there is some way to go in convincing the fans that more tech is the answer. The Football Supporters Association surveyed fans across all 20 Premier League clubs this year. 3/4 want the current version of VAR scrapped. 94% say it's made football worse. So, would more AI actually be different? And is there a version of this technology that football wants, but just doesn't know it yet? Andy Rhodes is Managing Director of Lenovo in the UK and Ireland. Arnaud Sasslabura is a machine learning engineer currently with Gemini Sports. He's worked previously with the US Soccer Federation. Ahmad, welcome to you. And our co-host and Manchester United fan.
You had to say that, Burnley
Can't win them all. Priya Lakhani is with us and has seen some of this in action, so has a very good view on it. Andy, let's start with you, with the basics. When fans switch in to the World Cup on their televisions on the 11th of June, what will they see that is genuinely different from a World Cup they've watched before?
I think there's a number of things. I mean, the first is that technology is going to enhance the viewing experience in many, many different ways, and we can talk about those. The first, I think, is if you're there in the stadium, getting to your seat safely, securely, in a timely manner is going to be all AI guided now. So there'll be a lot of technology that FIFA use to actually do wayfinding, to get to the right place at the right time. And, you know, we've all been there. You know, you've paid all this money to go to a match. You've queued, you know, on trains and planes and automobiles. And then you just want to get to your seat. And
so from this one command centre, they will be able to get real-time messaging, will they, on where to go and how quickly to go?
I hope they're going to tell people if the president's turning up, because a lot of us missed part of the US Open because of the security queues. Yes. So as long as you're going to take that into account.
Go quickly.
But yes. I think it is things like that. You know, I mean, you've got incremental weather, you've got, you know, other disruptions, and to have digital twins of all of the stadiums, to be able to have all these real-time feeds coming in and then have AI tools sort of interpret that data and help FIFA make decisions. So that's one thing. The other is, let's talk about the fans and the viewing experience, because we're all fans and we all want that. So from just basics like, you know, much better feeds from the video ref, you know, the jitter that comes, you know, everyone wants to see that feed, see what it's like to be in the thick of the action, see what the ref sees, because we all want to know why he or she is making those decisions. So that's another thing, enhancing that with AI.
Yeah, because that's pretty underwhelming in the Premier League at the moment, isn't it? I have watched some of that, and it's juddering, and you think, why am I looking at the pitch again? And I can't interpret what's going on.
Exactly, and AI can fix some of that. And so we've got certain technologies at Lenovo that we're working with FIFA on that will reduce that jitter by up to 50%, sometimes even more, at, you know, speed still of resolutions of over 1K. So that will really enhance that. And I think people want to be in the action. But if it's so off-putting, then it's hard to go do that. And then just basic things like making it more human, 3D avatars of every player, and then injecting that into some of the technologies like VAR. So rather than see generic humanoid figures in the VAR, the video ref things, you'll actually have these scans of the players. It will make it, you know, very, very accurate, but also it will enhance the viewer experience, because now you can see your player, the avatar of your player. It's not just generic.
Right, let's just, because they'll see, our viewers will see on the video that you're scanning individually every one of the players from the 48 teams taking part. So they've all stood there, have they? They've all been virtually scanned.
Correct.
Why is that different to the sort of fairly anodyne avatar that we get at the moment in the Premier League?
Well, I think two ways. The first is we can scan to an accuracy of, I think, 1 or 2 millimeters of each player. So every player has a different shape, size. And so you can have more accuracy when you put that avatar and that technology into other people's technology to see who's breaking the game line and when and things like that. So one is a level of accuracy. The second is people like to see their players. They like to see, obviously an avatar replica of their players. And so you just get more interaction and connection when you know it's not just a generic, person.
Yeah,
I think, Christian, if you imagine, right, if we put you into a 3D scanner and you create this...
Please never do that.
Yeah, and we create a data...
Like a pear drop. Okay, go on.
I'm not going to comment. This happens sometimes on this show. It's not to do with AI. You can use a filter. Imagine we put you into a 3D scanner and created a data mesh. So about 10,000 data points of your body. And so those data points separated by 1 millimetre or 2 millimetres apart would mean that on the field, what you're actually seeing mathematically is these data points. So when you're looking at offside, right, when you're looking at any of the rules in football and you're interpreting those, I think this is really important. It increases precision. So you can see, for example, where's the shoulder, where's the knee, for example.
But when I'm looking at that, and this is, it's really important now because I know there are cameras all over the stadium looking at the line, where the line is. Am I looking at an interpretation of the player crossing that line or am I looking at a sort of a real image of what's just taken place?
So in some sports, you're actually looking at a simulation, which is really interesting. So in tennis, for example, they use Hawkeye. Right, people, when they look at the screen, think that they're watching a video replay of what happened. They're actually not. They're looking at a simulation because they're tracking through cameras and through sensors the trajectory of the ball, how far it's going, where it's likely to land. So when you see that ball, for example, drop on the line and they say out, it's a simulation. That's why on some of the clay courts, players are getting really upset and they're saying, no, it was in. And I can even show you where the ball bounced in the clay. So, and it can be out by a couple of millimetres. The most important point here is it's about precision. The more and more data points you have, the more and more sensors. The cameras in FIFA World Cup this year are very important because the cameras are going to have more frames per second per camera than a broadcast camera.
And how does that help you?
How
does that help Lenovo in terms of the technology? If you've got more data points and it works faster, what can you do with that?
So we're not providing the video referee analysis. That's another company. We're embedding our technology in to help them make that more accurate. And the more data points they have, the more they can make it accurate. So that's one. The second, I think, is this viewer. The viewer, if they're waiting to see, what's going on, they really want to see, a much more digital image of someone that they know versus just this generic, element. I think the third thing you said about what else we'll see, I think the games hopefully will get better because of AI, because the teams now have access to this incredibly rich data set to then do their training and coaching. I think we've got 2,000 data points on every player during the match. They can see that post-game, they can get all of that rich data, and they'll be able to analyze, on each game, what happened. What did their defense do? What did the attack do? Where was the goalkeeper positioned when a goal was scored? They can then review all of that and go back and see what they would do differently in the next game.
Which is where Ahmad comes in. Ahmad, we're going to talk plenty more about how teams use these data points and how it's improving the game. But just from a coaches and players perspective, from what you're hearing about the VAR, first of all, do you think that is going to help with some of the cynicism that is around the technology at the moment?
Yeah, I think so, for sure, because right now the technology itself is the least controversial bit because you have cameras, you have sensors that work really well. I think what's frustrating for clubs and for players alike is that it breaks the rhythm and there is opacity in the decision making because you have a 3 to 4 minute pause sometimes between a game, and that breaks the flow, it breaks the energy, it breaks tactical patterns that the team is trying to build momentum, it sometimes kills that. So I think it's more of a design choice that we need to solve for rather than a technical choice. Because again, like if you improve the workflow and the communication methods, I think naturally people would be, or like clubs would be more inclined towards using these sort of technologies.
But you talk to football directors and people within clubs, and I guess you also come across officials as well. Does an improved avatar of the type that Andy's talking about and a confidence in the VAR system, does that Does that improve things if you know that the technology is accurate?
I think so. I think that part definitely helps because again, as you say, like you have a generic model before where not every player looks like that. Every player is different height, they are different weights, they run at different speeds. And if you are capturing all of that information properly, then you are actually building towards a more accurate system. So in that sense, you are also trying to solve for like using technology, you're trying to solve for better accuracy as well.
And, I think the point is there's no football fan out there that doesn't want an accurate decision. They want accurate decisions, right? If you think to the World Cup quarter-final in '86, everybody would have liked VAR when Maradona punched the ball into the goal, right? That could have changed the outcome. They want an accurate decision.
Well, there's immense cynicism around it. I mean, if you look at goal line technology, and I can think of an England game against Germany where the ball, Lampard hit the ball, it was quite clearly over the line. And now we've got to a point where we've solved that problem. And we've had a problem with drawing lines for offside, and that was definitely problematic 2 seasons ago, and we're solving that problem, which is why I know there is a lot of cynicism around VAR, but I wonder if we're moving steadily and slowly towards, as I said at the top, a version of this technology that football fans actually do want and yet don't know it.
Yeah, and I think so. And I think it is technical, actually. I really do. And the reason why is, look, people get upset, right? And football's known they get upset anyway when the decision's not going your way. But the point is that the whole point of VAR was to introduce an element of objectivity. That's the point of using technology. VAR is really interesting in highlighting the relationship between humans and technology. When we brought technology into the game, they said, right, OK, we're going to have accurate and objective decisions. And then VAR made mistakes.
So we've heard then what Lenovo and FIFA are building for the biggest stage in world football. It's really exciting. But long before the first whistle blows at the World Cup, AI is going to be changing how the teams prepare, how coaches think, how players are developed. Ahmad has been working at the coalface of that with the US Soccer Federation and with clubs on both sides of the Atlantic. And before we get into what will be available to teams at the World Cup, Ahmad, help us understand how far we've already come. What can AI tell a coach today that they genuinely couldn't see before?
Yeah, so right now, I think where we are at with AI, it's not about what the human cannot see, it's what the human can see without having necessarily the time to look at it. Because if you look at it from a match analyst perspective, let's say you take a single match in a Premier League, you're going to look at first 5 games of how your team played, then you're going to look at how your opposition played and their last 5 games. So that's already a lot of video. And an analyst has to sit down, maybe watch all these compilations, maybe like the whole game at times, and then come up with a decision or a strategy which they have to relay to their coaches. Now, if you have AI and technology, watch it. Maybe you can surface what really matters and you can explain the key decisions that were being made to the coaches. So, for example, a fullback is stepping early and there's a pattern that you can see there. So that's maybe a key insight that you want to communicate to your coach, that you want your wingers to exploit that fullback. Right. And there's also this whole thing about tracking data, right? Where you have 22 players on the pitch, where sometimes when you're looking at it from a broadcast frame, but now you can only see like the player who's on the ball and then maybe 5 or 6 players surrounding them. But if you have all the information of all 22 players on a pitch, you can start asking questions like, what off-ball run did my striker make that's opened some space for somebody else to exploit? And then you can start calculating off-ball values, which is super important when it comes to recruiting players.
Amon, you used a model that was borrowed from the science of crystals, the way that molecules rearrange to understand how teams move and transition. Can you explain that to a football fan? What does crystal science have to do with the counter-attack I watch on a Saturday?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, when I was first doing to my master's degree, I did come across this paper which was trying to use graph neural nets. And it tried to predict how atoms rearrange themselves and how their structure relates to how the molecule works. And I thought about it from a football sense because I'm always thinking about football because that's what I do most of the day. And I thought like the way these atoms arrange themselves, that's how the molecule property is. And if you think about it, the way the 11 players arrange themselves on the pitch, that leads to either successful or unsuccessful events for them. And we sort of built this pattern of connections for individuals, not necessarily, but more of a team structure. And once you have every player can act as a node, so the player is your atom in this case, and every player has a link between them, which is the edge, where you can encode a lot of information for how they are moving together, what's the synergy between them, how quickly are they moving. And then you ask the question, like, given this shape now, what's the probability that my counterattack is going to end up being successful?
Yeah.
So here is the really important point about what you're describing, because the data points is backward looking to an extent. It is predictive, but what you're actually describing is movement and the predictive nature of how a team attacks or defends, and AI can help in that direction.
Precisely. I think that's the direction we want to head into, is being more predictive, because that gives you more power into making crucial decisions.
Do
So
you
for
think some of
example,
that is already happening in real time? Because I see coaches now on the bench, and I saw it at the Champions League final, where there's somebody just staring at a screen and not watching the match.
yeah, for sure. Like
Bit like my son.
You do have a tactic boards now where they are trying to come up with these scenarios for what if scenarios, like if my player would have moved in this direction versus the other, what would have happened. I think right now it's a deliberate decision choice, though, that everything that's predictive is done
So
behind
when you
the
hear
doors.
when you hear the commentator Ahmad say, "Oh, in the last 10 minutes, Manchester City have really got a foothold in this game," is there data over that 10-minute period that someone on the bench is looking at and saying, this is where it's going wrong for us? The fullbacks are pushing forward, or we're not getting to grips with the midfield, whatever it is. But they can see that in real time evolving, or they will be able
Absolutely.
to, increasingly
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly where we are heading towards, because once you start getting those descriptive questions answered, the predictive part comes from the AI then.
Right.
And Christian, what happens when everyone has that?
Well,
When both
maybe Burnley
teams, this is we want viewers to remain on this show. But what happens when both have that? And that's really, really interesting, because one will say, "Is this my strategy?" And then the other will say, "Well, they know that strategy, so what happens there?"
Football is an international sport, and so is this programme. And we've had a message from Morris in Singapore, one of our audience questions. He's been watching the programme. He asks, at what point do we expect AI to move beyond recombining all our human knowledge and start generating genuinely new discoveries of its own? Now, Morris might have been talking about that in a different sphere or a different element of the programme that we've been discussing. But it's a brilliant question. It goes to the heart of what you do, Ahmad, because the crystals model that you've just described, that's still human insight driving the process. You saw the connection. You made the leap. Is there a point where the AI starts making those connections itself, where it finds something in the data that no human would ever have thought to look for?
Exactly. So right now, where we are at with AI, as you said, the crystal leap was human. I had to read a paper and then, apply my football knowledge to it. And then, that's how it worked out. Where we are right now is that AI is good at finding patterns that humans would not have necessarily noticed just because of the scale of the data we have available. So for example, let's say you rotate a winger's run by 30 degrees on a specific frame, and that increased by 2% probability in a successful counterattack. Now, an elite coach could probably recognize that because they know the game so well. But then when you give them these tools, they are sort of visualizing it on real time. And that's why that helps them in making these decisions, and it helps them in their coaching careers.
What about actually just coming back to the human interpretation of these data points? We've talked about how it's going to level the playing field. So Curacao, Cabo Verde, they'll get the same data as Brazil and Germany. Does it genuinely level the playing field? Because I can imagine that there are bigger nations who are going to use it better. They will have the real experts sitting there knowing how to interpret this data. And is there a premium on that?
Yeah, for sure. So, for example, if you look at it at a club level, as Priya mentioned, you have your Brighton and Brentfords who operate at a smaller budgets, let's say, but they are competing compared to their budgets. They are competing for like the top spots, the European spots. And you look at Brighton's model, like they have brought in so many good players and sold them, like bought them for a fraction of their market values, but then sold them for hundreds of millions of pounds. And that's where the whole recruitment model is built on. And I think it's the way these clubs are naturally using the data. I think it's more about the tools that necessarily don't equal to insight. So when you give everyone the same tool, you might compress the gap a little bit, but you don't necessarily close it because the wealthy clubs are going to adapt faster. They're going to integrate it deeper. But end of the day, it comes down to how are they actually closing that gap?
The issue is change. It's people changing. And I'm not even sure it is. The big clubs will have the money. But one thing that I have learned is that you'll have one person in a big club saying, I really get this. I get it subjective, black and white. This is what this data is telling me. And you'll often find there is another very critical decision maker in the club who says, no, I've got ball knowledge. I don't want to know about AI and numbers. And so it's a change management process. I think we're seeing this in business everywhere. We've talked about this a lot. It's about getting people on board. And you know what Tony Bloom's really well known for is being a mathematician and being ruthlessly objective with the data, but then adding that subjective point. OK, we need to look at the player's personality, at the cultural fit in the club. That's not very easy to do with a bunch of numbers.
You were just talking about this at Lenovo, weren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, just in terms of your own sales away from football.
Yeah, and you know, the technology, again, as I said, democratized for all is great. Our slogan is smarter technology for all, and it's smarter football for all in this context. But the implementation of that is so cultural. It's so cultural. You know, which clubs are going to embrace it? Which clubs are going to use it the most? How are they going to use it? And you have to sort of balance the use of technology and the outputs with the human elements that we've been talking about. You know, a coach is still a coach. They can choose to use that data or not choose to use that data. It's exactly the same in the business world that I live in. You know, you're trying to get people to use AI all the time, and some resist it for many, many reasons. So I think a lot of it comes down to the tech is sound. We've proved that out. The big question now is who's going to embrace it, who's going to use it the most.
Two quick thoughts to finish. We're going to see the best players in the world in the next few weeks.
So exciting.
It is so exciting.
So exciting.
But is there the thing that makes them great is that they do the unpredictable. So Ahmad, is there a player who makes a run that defies the data? Can AI ever capture that, or is there something in the game from your perspective that will always resist the numbers?
Yeah, I hope something always resists, because AI can definitely capture Messi's brilliance. Like, you can quantify how great of a player Messi was, not just from his goals and the assists that he's had, but also from the runs that he was making. But then it comes down to, like pure instinct, because AI cannot replace pure instinct, because of course it's Messi's ability to make that run, dribble past 10 players and score a goal. But the instinct to actually go on and do that, like, that's always going to come down at a pure human level. So I think where AI is today, I think it can help you recruit better and, make you spend optimally in the transfer market and help you win a few games here and there. But if we ever predict every great moment, I think we've kind of ruined the sport, right?
Yeah. The other question I have is that we're all going to be turning to our wall charts, and they're bigger wall charts this year, to and plot our respective teams' advance on the final. And some of us like to have a flutter of a weekend. Some of us have an acca. And there's a big question about all this when it comes to betting and predictive betting. Can this same technology be used to predict outcomes in games?
We already do it
in betting.
So what I really loved it.
Is it how accurate is it?
Well, so I'm more of a novice here, because I don't, I'm not the same as my lead data scientist who beats us in fantasy Premier every single year because his models are so much better. We already do this. We all download data. We're all building our own models.
So you do fantasy football via AI. I've never played you.
Well, I enjoy it. So you can, I just, as a novice, download data from Kaggle. So there's lots of data on there. I think I was talking to Ahmad about this not so long ago when we spoke. And you essentially just try and model.
Such an amateur.
I'm really sorry, but that is exactly what do you think I've been doing all this time in my free time? So we already do this. But what I would say to answer your question is, look, the data's available. There's lots of data out there, and it's actually a lot of fun. I love the fact that I got my son into maths and into machine learning without really realising, just trying to figure out how much.
Through his obsession with Arsenal.
Yeah, well, exactly. When I say obsession with Arsenal, like his life is Arsenal. So he enjoyed it. But the key is, Christian, the betting houses have better technology than you do, I'm afraid, right? They invest. They have been investing in this for years. This is not new to them. They have been taking every single data point they can to try and beat you when it comes to the odds. So It's well worth a punt and it's well worth a try, and it can be a bit of fun. But just remember that you now are working with an industry that actually understand machine learning for the last 75 years since it existed, whereas it might be quite new to some of us.
Right. I'll keep my money where it is.
I work way too hard to waste my money on betting, so I'll stay out of this debate.
Win. There's a reason why the bookies go home with a smile on their face. Andy, Ahmad, Priya, thank you all. Thank you very much indeed. Next week on AI Decoded, we're going to look at the big IPOs. So if you've got some thoughts on that, the IPO of Anthropic and ChatGPT in their trillions, then do get in touch. Usual email, aidecoded@bbc.co.uk. I'm also going to put up on the screen the QR code for the back episodes, which some of you keep asking me about. It's all there on the BBC AI Decoded YouTube playlist, so do go back, have a look at that. And it's also on the iPlayer if you're watching here in the UK. That's the housekeeping. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next week.